Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy today's video. Enjoy watching.
My friend, who was suffering from cancer, had always wanted to have a grand wedding, and to my surprise, she had chosen my boyfriend as her partner. As I watched her enjoy her big day, I found solace in the arms of a stranger. He kept asking me if I was truly willing to marry him, sending me numerous messages to confirm. After I agreed, he sent me over a dozen designs of diamond engagement rings, each one more stunning than the last. He told me that he had purchased them at an auction and asked if I liked any of them. When I didn't respond immediately, he wrote again, offering to take me to a jewelry auction in the UK so I could choose one myself. As I carefully examined the rings, I sent a voice message to Non, telling him that I liked the Monty and Rosa design and suggesting we choose that one for our wedding ring. Just then, Ray appeared behind me and overheard me mention wedding ring. For the first time, his normally calm face showed a flash of panic. "What wedding ring?" he asked, looking at me with an intensity that almost unsettled me. I was about to come up with an excuse, but my phone rang, and it was my best friend, Elena Torres. She was crying and told me that she had had another nosebleed and was scared. Before I could respond, Ray took the phone and assured Elena that he would be there to take care of her. He then rushed out of the room without saying another word to me, leaving me standing there, forgotten. I realized that he had planned a romantic evening cruise on the Pearl River for us that night, a gesture to make up for missing our 10th anniversary. It was then that I felt what it was like to let go of someone, watching him run after another woman. My heart remained calm, unaffected, as if nothing could disturb it. My phone rang again, and it was Nathan, asking if I was ready to meet him in Boston the next day. I replied softly, asking for a week to sort things out before returning to Seattle and getting married. He agreed, his voice warm and reassuring, telling me that he would wait for me. After we hung up, I called my grandfather to say goodbye. He and Ray's father had been comrades in arms and shared a deep bond. When I was 8, I was diagnosed with a severe heart condition, and my grandfather sent me to Boston to receive treatment at a renowned private hospital specializing in cardiology. Since then, Ray's parents had taken care of me like a daughter, and my grandfather had always treated me with infinite kindness. As I prepared to leave, it felt natural to bid my grandfather farewell. That night, Ray returned home, and a message from Elena appeared on my phone, showing a photo of Ray leaning in to take a bite of cake while Elena smeared cream on his cheek. She later deleted the message and apologized, saying she had sent it to the wrong person. Ray had thought it was from someone else and asked her to send it to him. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to my room and started packing my things in silence. The next day, at noon, Ray finally arrived home with a gift to make amends. He told me that Elena's condition had worsened the night before, and he had taken her to the hospital. I remained silent as I opened the velvet box he gave me, revealing an elegant Van Cleef & Arpels watch surrounded by diamonds. It was beautiful and extravagant, but I remembered that he had once given Elena a similar gift, and mine was just a more expensive version. Noticing my lack of response, Ray asked if I was upset, but I just looked at him, and he seemed to sense that something was off. He finally sighed and said he was glad I wasn't angry, mentioning that we had a long future together. But Elena's eyes sparkled with emotion, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. I didn't want to hear more, so I turned to leave, but Ray grabbed my wrist, stopping me. When I looked at him, my expression was cold, my gaze emotionless. "What do you want?" I asked. Ray seemed slightly annoyed, although he didn't seem to know why. Before he could say anything more, his phone rang again. He looked at the screen and then back at me. "Trina, I'll be on a business trip for a few days. I won't be back for a while. Take care," he said. I replied with naturalness, thinking that his absence would make it easier for me to visit the Al family to say goodbye. The next morning, I gathered the gifts I had prepared and headed to the Al family's house. When Mrs. Al heard that I would be returning to Seattle, her eyes filled with concern. "Trina, what happened? You've adapted so well here in Boston. Why are you leaving so suddenly?" Mr. Al, on the other hand, slammed his fist on the table in frustration. "And where is Ray? Why didn't he come with you? Did he treat you badly?" I hesitated, but I couldn't tell them the whole truth. No, nothing like that. I've just been away from home for too long, and I'd like to return and reconnect. Mrs. Owl looked at me with unease, and Ray's absence seemed to make things simpler. Just then, the front door opened, and Ray walked in with Elena by his side, his expression calm and confident. "Trina, what a surprise to see you here," he said with a smile, as if he were already part of the family. I looked at him firmly and said, "I don't need to explain why I'm here." I walked past Ray, heading for the door. Ray quickly followed me, his voice urgent. "Trina, you're misunderstanding everything. I just brought Elena here so my parents could help her find a good doctor." He stopped, trying to appeal to my reason. "After all, she's also your best friend. You're not upset, are you?" I stopped for a brief moment, and memories flooded my mind. I remembered his promise under the cherry blossom tree when I was 18. He had said that marrying me was his dream, and he had promised to take me to meet his parents as his future wife. But here he was, presenting another woman to his family while telling me he was on a business trip. Seeing the anticipation in Ray's eyes, I replied calmly, "Why would I care? I'm not the type to hold grudges. People who aren't worth it don't deserve my concern." Ray was momentarily taken aback. "Trina, you really don't care at all?" It was impossible to please him. When he and Elena approached me earlier, he had called me close-minded for being upset. Now that I chose to ignore him, he wasn't satisfied either. Without saying another word, he leaned in and kissed my forehead. "Be good and wait for me at home," he said softly as the elevator doors closed. I wiped my forehead, feeling nauseated. On our 10th anniversary, Ray had also evaded me with some excuse about a business trip. That night, I received a video call from Elena, and when the call connected, I could hear the lively sounds of a wedding celebration. As the truth slowly revealed itself to me, I realized that the wedding was between Ray and Elena. I saw the music, the lights, the sound of laughter, and it all hit me like a storm that wouldn't let up. I felt the weight of each lie, each broken promise, but instead of falling into sadness or anger, something inside me ignited. I decided that this would be the last time someone would trample me like that. I was ready to put an end to the farce. I arrived early at the next event, greeted everyone with a calm smile, and observed every detail, the flowers, the decorated hall, the anxious faces of the guests. There was something deeply ironic about being there, on the verge of facing the biggest moment of my life, not for love, but for the truth. When it was time for me to speak, I approached the microphone to give a few words of gratitude. I noticed how all eyes were on me, attentive and expectant. My voice began calmly but was loaded with intention. I spoke about what love and trust mean, about the promises made and the hopes broken. I felt the atmosphere change, as if an invisible hair had fallen over the room. People started looking at each other, perceiving that my words had a double meaning, that there was something more behind each phrase. And it was then that I revealed the truth. I wanted to thank everyone for being there, especially Ray and Elena, who taught me that betrayal can come from where you least expect it. Ray, my boyfriend, and Elena, my lifelong friend, who were now married to each other, behind this facade of lies and deceit. A murmur of astonishment ran through the room, and the guests were stunned. Some had their mouths open, while others were in complete disbelief. I looked at them all, but my gaze focused on Ray and Elena, who had turned pale. Ray tried to approach me, his face pale and his eyes wide, but I cut him off, raising my hand to stop him. I didn't allow him the opportunity to justify the unjustifiable. "There was nothing to explain, Ray. Would you deny the messages, the calls, and the secret wedding you had?" The room fell into a silence that was almost palpable, and I felt that I finally had control. It was a powerful and liberating sensation. Elena tried to intervene, but I didn't even look at her. I had spent so many sleepless nights questioning what our friendship meant, if it was ever real. I could see her face turning red with shame as she searched for an escape, but there was no place for her to hide from the truth. The expressions of the guests changed from surprise to incredulity, and some even showed a hint of satisfaction, as if they were witnessing the climax of a live soap opera. Ray looked at me with a mixture of anger and desperation, whispering, "Trina, don't do this," but his voice was barely audible over the growing murmur of the room. Ignoring him, I continued, what hurts the most is not the betrayal, but the arrogance of thinking that I would never discover the truth, that I would never realize that everything we lived was a lie. At that moment, I felt completely free from any trace of love or pain for Ray. My words were no longer for him or Elena, but for myself, to make it clear that I would no longer carry the weight of their disloyalty. I thanked that moment because I could finally tell everyone that I had learned to value myself and never accept less than what I deserved. With those final words, I left the microphone and took a step back, feeling a relief that filled me with an unexpected sense of peace. As I walked off the stage, I felt the gaze of everyone burning my back, but I no longer cared. I had said what I needed to say. On my way to the door, some guests tried to stop me, murmuring phrases of shock or incredulity. I heard someone say, "Is this for real?" and others whispering. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction seeing how the truth had shaken everyone, like throwing a stone into a lake of appearances and watching the waves expand relentlessly. Ray caught up to me before I could leave, grabbing my arm with force. His eyes were filled with a mix of anger and supplication. "Trina, this is all a misunderstanding. You can't leave like this. We can talk about it." But all I felt when I looked at him was repulsion. Talking to him after everything that had happened was like trying to reason with a shadow. I shook off his grip and left him standing there, exposed and unable to say or do anything to change what had just happened. As I walked out of the hall, the fresh air enveloped me like a balm, and I felt a wave of freedom and lightness that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Each step I took away from that place was a weight lifted off my heart. A few meters from the exit, I saw Nathan waiting for me with a serene but expectant expression, as if he knew exactly what had just happened. Without saying a word, I approached him, and in silence, he extended his hand, offering me a way out, a new opportunity without questions or reproaches. We got into the car, and as we drove away, my heart still racing, I felt a sense of certainty that I was better off than I had been in a long time. Nathan, without saying more, squeezed my hand, and we headed towards a new beginning, away from all the deception. As the car advanced through the city streets, I let my thoughts settle into the silence we shared. It was as if all the moments of anguish and doubt were finally leaving me behind, becoming distant memories. Nathan, always attentive, watched me with an eye, and with each kilometer we covered, I felt like I was leaving behind not only Ray and Elena, but also a version of myself that had tolerated too much. That Trina no longer existed. In her place was someone who understood her own worth. When we arrived at the apartment, Nathan offered to stay and make sure I was okay, but I smiled and reassured him that I was fine. I just needed some time to process everything, but I thanked him for being there. We said our goodbyes with a warm hug, and when I finally closed the door behind him, I allowed myself to breathe deeply, savoring the peace and quiet of my home. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I checked my phone and found several messages from Ray and Elena, but I didn't open them, leaving them as remnants of a past life that no longer had a place in the new chapter one was building. I realized that I didn't feel any anger or sadness, just an overwhelming sense of calm, as if I had finally closed a chapter that had lasted too long. There was something liberating about that indifference, knowing that they no longer had power over my emotions or my peace. I went to bed and slept deeply for the first time in a long time, without dreams or interruptions. The next day, I woke up with a renewed clarity, as if I had been reborn from the ashes of my old life. I decided not to respond to Ray's or Elena's messages. There was nothing more to say, and my silence would be the final answer, a wordless goodbye. That marked the end of our bond. The following days were a process of adaptation, rediscovering aspects of myself that I had put aside to focus on a relationship that ultimately wasn't what I thought it was. I started to enjoy the small moments that had previously seemed insignificant. Nathan, with his quiet companionship and unconditional support, became a pillar, but this time not as a refuge, but as a true partner. For the first time, I felt like I didn't need anyone else to feel complete. He was there without demands, just sharing the journey by my side. A week later, while sipping coffee in a quiet spot in the city, I saw that I had one last message from Ray. "I regret what I did, but I hope you'll understand me someday." I looked at the screen for a moment, feeling absolutely nothing. I closed the message without responding, and with that simple, silent act, I felt a definitive closure, a goodbye that didn't need words. I no longer held any grudges, just a deep peace. I knew that I had regained control of my life and my peace, and that my happiness was now in my own hands.